do it.
Raisa, I did not hear your full call sign in the pile-up. You only used your suffix. The rule says you have to use your full call sign.
That was a short video clip that Raisa R1BIG sent in for this month's show. So thank you very much, Raisa. It was cute, and it also went straight to the point. So it was fantastic. And we look forward to having Raisa on the show again in a future episode. All right, let's move on to the main part of the show now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Are you guys ready now?
That should be our intro.
You need to save that part about you muting me and then me shaking my head that I wasn't going to talk. You need to save that for the outtakes in December. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of the 2023 Ham Talk. I guess I'm going to have to start introducing us this way every month now. We're trying something new, apparently, so don't freak out. I'm a girl. I wear makeup sometimes. With me, of course, I'm Sam KE0LMY. I have the beautiful Melissa.
Hi, KI5ICQ, Lavernia, Texas.
I have Ms. Andrea.
Kilo 2 Echo Zulu. Hello.
And then, of course, we have Fred, who's also bringing Greg along. And for those of you who don't recall, Fred is the dinosaur that you see behind Greg.
Greg, N5XO.
First thing, we'd like to thank our sponsors, the Hamsters Week Signal Group. We really appreciate them because without their support, this podcast wouldn't exist. I'd like to give you guys just a quick compliment that I got in person the other day about the show. Someone had gone down the rabbit hole of YouTube and somehow stumbled across our podcast. Heaven help them. But we were told, I received word that they absolutely love the show and they want us to continue because we bring humor and it's not as dry. And they actually saw a couple of episodes where Andrea got to crack some jokes, which I'm sure she can slip into her segment. So we have a couple of things for you this month. Melissa's got comments and questions from you guys. You know that we always ask you to send us comments, questions, pictures of your ham shack. Come on, people. We want to bring that segment back. So we need you to start sending them in. What, Greg? See, look at you interrupting.
I said, come on, Mike.
Yeah, Mike, what is going on? We're calling you out again in person right here. Okay, not quite in person, but you know what I mean. Anyway, Mike, you know who you are. Get your picture of your ham shack to us because this is the third month I've asked for it, fourth month I've asked for it.
A year.
It hasn't quite been a year. We know you've been stalking us, Mike. You're our number one fan. So go ahead and get your pictures in to Melissa because she absolutely loves to see the ham shacks. And even if your ham shack is just the back of your car, the front of your car, if you're setting up a rover, just like Andrea's got, send us the pictures, people. All right. And then Andrea's segment this month is on, and now he's going to have to edit because I've forgotten. Andrea, what was it? DC what?
DC power distribution.
Thank you.
I'm going to cut that out.
So Greg's lazy and doesn't edit the videos. So you guys can see that. There you go. Now you have to edit it. So Andrea's segment is on DC power distribution. And then my segment this month is going to be on teaching radio communications to first responder agencies. Greg, of course, is being lazy and doesn't have a segment. There, now you're going to have to edit.
I have no problem being lazy once.
Excellent. So Fred is weighing in on this subject, and he is threatening Greg that if Greg does not get a segment in starting next month, Fred is going to eat him. You remember in Jurassic Park where the dinosaur comes down and eats the dude? That. Hopefully that's not striped or struck. I didn't use music. What? So let's go ahead and start with Melissa's segment, just because I like messing with Greg for how he has to put things together. So Melissa's segment is first, and we want to tackle all of the comments and questions. So Miss Melissa, what do you have for us this month?
All right. Well, first, I'm going to wipe a tear off my eye because before we started recording, we were cutting up so much. Okay. All right. We have some comments this month. And of course, we have a comment from Mike McDonald. My Christmas wish was y'all continue at least another year and I'll clean and take photos of my shack so y'all can talk about. Corey Chandler says, Greg, you should name your rover the Hamster Mobile. For rover antennas, I use several directive systems rover special beams that are on 8-foot booms. They are center mounted and don't go into the other lane of traffic. 73 DE WA5RR. Andrea, you got any comments?
Oh, I believe that they are not exactly center mounted, but they might be. I had to cut mine down to 6 feet, mostly because I didn't want to stick over the edge of the vehicle. 8 foot's legal on the highway, so that's okay. Although an 8-foot beam, the elements will technically be a little bit larger. I doubt anybody complain, but.
All right. Okay, another comment from Mike McDonald's. Mike McDonald, you guys need to come up with a sticker, logo, hats, etc. for sale for your loyal listeners to buy and help support y'all. Or have an Amazon thing where you click a link to purchase through Amazon and y'all can make a few pennies for our shopping. And Mike and everybody, Smile is ending February 20th. So they're ending that program. So just so everybody knows, I just got my email like last week saying that was going to end. Okay, on to questions. We have a question from Bill. Bill says, I do not have my call sign yet. Testing soon. I found your show 3 months ago. I binge watched all of them over the holidays. Andrea and Greg, please tell us why you went to VHF, UHF operating. I thought HF was the ultimate goal for hams. So don't I need to get my general, or will I be okay staying a technician?
Well, I'll jump in first to answer that and say, well, from my perspective, being licensed for 40 years now, 42 years actually, when I got into the hobby, everybody started out on HF, and your first upgrade gave you VHF privileges and voice privileges for that matter. Each one has its own character. I operate and I do enjoy HF. VHF I've used in a utilitarian fashion with FM repeaters, etc., for casual operating. keep in touch with the local club members. Back in the days before cell phones, something to do from the car. The roving that I do now, the VHF competitions, I sort of fell into that accidentally, and that's itself a little bit of a story from a road trip gone wrong. The road trip went okay. I just thought, hey, I would operate for the contest. And I discovered that stations were very interested in the rovers out there. And that led me further into the weak signal VHF sideband operation rather than FM. And I guess for me, it's the technical challenge of doing VHF weak signal work versus HF. HF, you can easily talk across the country or around the world. VHF, it's technically much more difficult, but you can achieve a lot more than people tend to think. So I like all aspects of the hobby, and I would definitely say that there's upgrading and getting on HF is an adventure in its own way. FM repeaters local is its own thing. And then playing in weak signal VHF is its own thing. It's just a different aspect of the hobby, and they can be fun. Some people love some things, some people love others. Just like some people still bother to learn CW and start to enjoy CW more than talking voice.
Okay, Greg, you got anything?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of echo part of Andrea. First of all, this is my 53rd year in this hobby, and for the first 30 plus years, I never operated above 15 meters. I was on 40, 20, and 15. And as far as I was concerned, I didn't care about any of the other bands. VHF, UHF, when I first got licensed, was the technical license was for experimenters and stuff. And 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and all that was kind of in the realm of microwaves today for people. It was more experimental and everything. I fell into it by accident as well. I got my first new radio in many years, TS2000. It had 6 meters on it and 2 meters. And I started doing some communications local, met a bunch of people here local and everything. And then I got in the 6 meter contest, made a contact. The guy goes, let's work each other on 2. And I'm like, dude, you're in Kansas. That's not going to happen. I worked him, N0IRS, and 10 other stations in Kansas City during the June 2009 contest. Became absolutely addicted to 2 meter single sideband operating and up, and slowly started doing it. And like Andrea said, to me, it's the technical aspect. I like the challenge. Anybody, in my opinion, can pick up an HF microphone and talk around the globe with a little effort. You get on VHF and you're talking 500, 1,000 miles, and it's a long accomplishment, and it's exciting to me. So from that aspect, I really like it. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we had a really nice opening, and I made it to within 27 miles of Miss Sam's hometown there. So had she been on the air with a horizontal antenna, just saying.
See what happens
Okay.
when I stay muted? Everybody doesn't get my sparkling personality.
So, Is it encouraged to get the general?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. You want to take advantage, and just because for us VHF UHF is where the excitement's at, there's a lot of fun on HF. It is a really exciting time, especially when you are new to it and you're reaching out and working other countries and stuff. It's a big difference than working the guy down the road.
Okay, all right. Okay, we have a question from Roger. Roger says, I have an IC 9700 that generates 100 watts on 2 meters and 75 watts on 70 centimeters, but only 10 watts on 23 centimeters. I know power is important on VHF and above. So what good is 10 watts? And should I even bother purchasing or building an antenna for 23 cm?
Absolutely. 10 watts on 23 centimeters with band conditions can get you very long distance. I've worked from San Antonio, Texas. I've worked into Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and Alabama on 10 watts with no problem. Also made a contact in Cuba with 10 watts. So, no, I'm sorry, that was on 2 meters. I did not make it into 23 centimeters. That was 2 meter contact, and it was probably 300 watts. But 10 watts can do a lot. As you build up your station, you're going to want a little bit more power just because it makes it easier to be the one to break a pile up. But other than that, have fun with that 10 watts. 45 element Yagi up about above the trees, and you're going to have fun.
I saw that look on Andrea's face.
Oh, I just want to add to this. Very, very much. You need to keep in mind that when you go up into those higher frequencies, your antenna's gain goes up quite a bit, and that makes up for the lower power. And generally, people are not running as high power. To give some examples, when I really started roving, and I thought 70 centimeters would be very limited compared to 2 meters. And I will say trees and vegetation have a big impact when you get up to these high frequencies. But if you can get some distance away from that or just above it, with my rover, on 902 megahertz, which is 33 centimeters, I only have 6 watts. I have 30 watts on 23 centimeters, excuse me, and 100 watts on 70 centimeters. And if I can work somebody on 70 centimeters, and if they have 33 centimeters or 23 centimeters, I have a very high probability of being able to work them on those bands with my 6 watts on 33 centimeters and my 30 watts. So 10 watts, that's about 4 dB down from what I've got in the car. And keep in mind, my antenna on my car on 23 and 33 centimeters is, let's see, 12 is the high one, 8 feet off the ground, 9 feet off the ground. That's it. And it's only a 6 foot long Yagi. 12 foot would add 3 more dB and compensate for that lower power. Or I should say 16 foot. Yes. No, excuse me, 12 foot. You just double the length to get 3 dB. And you can probably find a 20 foot Yagi for that band out there. It's a lot of elements. So it's definitely usable like that.
All right. Okay. One last question from Christopher. I have been a ham for 15 years and operate primary HF and AM on 75 and 160 meters. I stumbled on your show about a year and a half ago, and I want to say I absolutely love your show. So many ham shows take themselves so seriously, and they're either too technical or they come over as condescending. What makes watching your show so fun is that you're having fun with each other, and your easy relationship with each other is very infectious. You make ham radio sound fun, and I like a great hobby compared to the stuffed shirts of so many other clubs and shows. Let me ask you a question before I forget what I wanted. This is the way it is. What is your all's opinion? Okay, in Texas, it's y'all's. Okay, it's Y''ALLS, you all's, y'all's. What is your all's opinion of magnetic loop antennas for transmission and receive for 160 meters through 20 meters?
Wow. Andrea, I hope you got an answer, because I have no experience with magnetic loop antennas. I know they're supposed to be very quiet compared to dipoles and everything else, but I have no experience with them. The only thing that I'm aware of, other than they're supposed to be good, quiet listening antennas, is if you transmit them, they tend to have high voltage due to the high Q. But beyond that, that's you just pushed the entire limit of my knowledge on that subject. I know, I'll shut up now.
And I have really nothing to add on that. I know people who've used them, particularly back in the national parks on the air day. They're a great antenna when you go portable. The one complaint that I've heard about them is for single sideband. Well, if you're operating simplex operation, fine, but some operators tried to operate split, and even the small split of like 10 kilohertz on HF was like too much for the antenna. Now, and of course they have to get tuned for the frequency you're on. But like Greg said, they're quiet for receiving. And I've thought about putting a mag loop on the car actually for certain purposes, but I really don't know much about them. I was just going to use one for receive, which changes the dynamic a little bit.
All right, we're done.
All right.
Hardly done
I
yet.
suppose y'all want me to unmute now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
It's kind of enjoyable.
So thank you, Miss Melissa. And Mike C., we called you out before I even knew there were comments from you. All right. And I know that Andrea's segment, I'm just going to let her introduce it at this point, because there's technicalities, and you guys know by 2 years in, almost 3 years, we've been doing this is our 3rd year. I am not the technical one. So Andrea, introduce your segment.
Yes. In this episode, we're going to talk about DC power distribution, how to get the right wire sizes, how not to create fires in your car.
That's a good idea.
I can think of some fire departments that'll probably be very grateful for that.
Yes. And some practical guide to, for your home station wire limitations and a little bit in the mobile. We'll try not to go too crazy, but have some fun with it. So everyone enjoy. Hi, everyone. Today, I am talking about direct current, also known as DC. DC is where you have a steady voltage and your current flows in one direction from positive to negative. This is unlike AC at your wall outlets, where the voltage is varying over time, going from positive to negative, and current is flowing back and forth, alternating direction, hence the term alternating current. But my segment today is about direct current. And pretty much that's all there is to it. It flows one way. In amateur radio, we've kind of, when I first got into the hobby, there was equipment powered from AC, but these days pretty much everything runs off of 12 volts DC. And here I should take a minute or two to talk about 13.8 volts. A lot of people, I have questions, why do we see 12 volts sometimes? Sometimes we see 13.8 volts. Can my 12 volt equipment work at 13.8 volts? Can 13.8 volt equipment work off of a 12 volt battery? The difference between 12 volts and 13.8 volts obviously is 1.8 volts, but that's not what you want to know. What is going on here is 12 volts refers to really the battery, like the lead acid batteries we use in our car. The nominal output voltage is 12 volts. However, when those batteries are getting charged, the voltage used to charge them is 13.8 volts. So on a 12 volt system, equipment needs to work across that full range of 12 volts to 13.8 volts. In fact, because your battery voltage will go down as you use power from your battery, if it's not getting recharged, it needs to go lower. And generally speaking, 10 volts is considered the minimum voltage you can discharge a 12 volt battery to before you can incur damage. At the other end of the spectrum, when a battery is first getting charged, the charge voltage may go up to 14.5 volts. And recently, I discovered in my new car, go up to 15 volts. Thank Ford for that, for a period of time if the vehicle hasn't been running a while, before backing off and eventually settling down to 13.8 volts. So amateur radio equipment, or any equipment designed to work off, quote, a 12 volt power system, is generally expected to work in that 10 volt to 14.5 or 15 volt range. Not all equipment works across that full range really well. You'll find some doesn't work so good when it gets below 11 volts. For this reason, typically the power supplies that we get to convert the AC wall power to the DC power in our shacks will be set to a nominal of 13.8 volts. Earlier, I made a statement about amateur radio equipment that used to run off AC, but most runs off this 12 volt DC. And there's a few good reasons for that. Operators can use their equipment from their home station with the power supply or use it in a mobile. They can go portable with just the battery alone. Battery backup becomes a lot easier because they can have their 13.8 volt power supply charging their 12 volt batteries. And when their AC mains go out and their power supply shuts down, they can run off the 12 volt battery. And I should say, generally speaking, you don't want to just hook up your power supply to a battery. You want some sort of charge controller in there, sometimes a separate charger for the battery. But in any case, the radio equipment can run off the battery or off the power supply. Another big factor as to why amateur radio equipment has migrated to 12 volts is that this is more or less available worldwide. The 12 volts comes from the chemistry of the battery. They've been making these batteries for many, many, many years. And so it's pretty much ubiquitous throughout the world. Whereas there's different AC power standards in part of the world. The US uses 110 volts, 60 hertz. Europe, a lot of that is 200 volts, 50 hertz. All those things make it difficult to run off of AC power because you have to convert it from all those different standards into what the equipment needs. And finally, the final reason why the equipment runs off 12 volts is it's lower cost, because you don't need to include that power supply to convert the AC to the DC that the equipment wants to run from. The one place in amateur radio where we still see AC power used is with high power amplifiers. At 12 volts to handle a kilowatt and input power closer to 2 kilowatt, you need a lot of current. Talking about the high currents needed at DC, this brings me to the subject of wiring. The one penalty we pay for low voltage DC is we need more current, and that means the wires need to be heavier. A common question when it comes to wiring is, how much current can I run through a certain gauge wire? The answer to that question can be a little complex. When it comes to engineering and design, you'll see rated currents for certain wires, and it depends upon the insulation type, and that's because certain insulation allows the wire to get hotter, and so therefore you technically can run more current through the wire. But the fact is the resistance of the wire remains the same, and in my view, I don't want my wires to run hot in the first place. For us as amateur radio operators, the big concern for us is going to be the voltage drop over a given distance of wire. A reason this becomes critical is because 12 volts or 13.8 volts isn't that much. And if we run too much current through our wire, the voltage can drop a volt or two, and that might not be a problem at 13.8 volts, but if we're just running off the battery, well, 12 volts drops to 10 volts, and our equipment's not going to work very good down at 10 volts. So we need to be a little bit conservative in our wire and watch how long our wires are. In fact, this is one of the big downsides of DC power, is that as particularly low voltage like this, as you start needing longer wire lengths, you need to go up in size just to minimize the voltage drop. But let me give some upper limits. These are the numbers I like to work with in terms of maximum current for wire gauge. For 16 gauge wire, I don't like to go above 10 amps. For 14 gauge, use 15 amps as the maximum. 12 gauge up to 25 amps. 10 gauge to 30 amps. 8 gauge up to 40 amps. 6 gauge out to 60. 4 gauge, I'll run as much as 80 amps. In my vehicle, I use 4 gauge, and I have that fused at 80 amps. And that is the main run between the battery in the engine compartment and the battery in the back of the vehicle near my amplifiers. And that main feed charges up that other battery. And even with that 4 gauge, if I put on the HF amplifier and draw 80 amps out of that, I'll have enough voltage drop. I actually get most of the current out of the battery in the rear, and that's by design. The numbers I've given you here in terms of the maximums I want to like to see for the wires, for about a 10-foot length, if you ran those gauges, those amount of currents, you'll see maybe half a volt drop. So now let's talk about power distribution. These days in amateur radio, a lot of us are using, got caught on the computer, things like this. Anderson power poles, they've become very common, and they're really nice. You can get 3 different types of contacts. They have the housings and the contacts. They're separate items. And you can get contacts for 15 amps, 25 amps, or 45 amps. One of the nice things about power poles, if you're using them, is there are a lot of off-the-shelf power distribution products that can help you connect your multiple pieces of amateur radio equipment, whatever you have, up to your power supplies. So you can have, like in my mobile, multiple amplifiers, multiple radios, all kind of plugging into these things. Some of them are relatively simple, like this block here that lets you plug a whole bunch in. A block like this is great if, say, you're coming from a 35 amp supply and all your wiring can handle 35 amps that's coming off of it. But be very cautious about hooking something that has small wires into this block. If you do, that 35 amps might cause those wires to burn up. So those wires should be fused. Then there are other devices like this one here, which has individual fuses for each connection. And these fuses can be taken out and replaced with different fuse values, and you can tailor it accordingly. So now that I've brought up the subject of fuses, let me get into a little bit of technical detail and give you a couple little lessons learned here. The purposes of fuses aren't to protect the equipment. They are to prevent hazards when something fails. And that failure could be something in the equipment. It could be something that cuts the insulation of the wire and shorts the wires together. And the main hazard that they are trying to protect against is fire. If you have too much current into a wire that's too small, that wire can get red hot and just sit red hot and catch things on fire. This is why we want to make sure we appropriately fuse the wires we have. We want to make sure that if we go from a high power source into something that has smaller wires that can't handle the full current of that power source, that we put fuses near the power source in line with those wires. Lessons learned. When I was very young, I hooked up some equipment in my car, and being a little bit, how shall I say, impatient and not having a fuse, I thought to myself, well, it will be okay for tonight, and I will go get myself a fuse tomorrow. Well, while driving home later that night, I start notice smoke coming in through the vents on my car. I pull over to the side, hop out of the car, lift the hood, and there are this glowing red wire in the dark around the edge of the engine compartment up to the front of the car. I had placed the wire someplace where it got pinched by the hood when I closed it, and after driving a little bit, it shorted out. I forget what I grabbed it with. I know it wasn't my hand because I didn't burn myself, but all I could see was this glowing wire. I didn't have a flashlight or anything. And I just took something and pulled it, and it just broke, and the fire stopped. Nothing else had caught fire, and all was good. Another case occurred in my mobile rover when I was doing a contest, and I didn't really think about this, but I use power poles for everything, and I do have some high power distribution points where I do have heavy gauge wires for amplifiers and such. And in this was the first time using the flex radio in the mobile. Flex radio wasn't a problem, but we had a little router to hook up because the flex radio uses Ethernet to connect to the computer. And this router ran off 12 volts. So we had a little wire and hooked up an adapter, and I just plugged it into my main distribution without thinking. We get all through the, and this was a sprint. It was just a 4-hour contest. And literally pulling into my driveway, noticed smoke coming up from the back of the car. Something had cut through the wire and shorted one of those small wires, and my power was just causing those wires to get red hot. Didn't know what it was at that moment. We just knew that something was catching fire, and I was able to reach into the back. I knew exactly where my main power distribution was, and grabbed that cable and pulled, and that stopped it right there. So the lesson I learned was I needed on the smaller wires and numerous other devices, which I subsequently after that installed things like coaxial relay switches, etc., that I had to address the fusing when I had smaller wires. That led me to a power distribution panel, much like the one I showed previously, which lets me have separate fuses for the different devices. And now that router is safely powered from a 2-amp fuse. And that's all I have for you today. This is Kilo 2 Echo Zulu, roving reporter for Ham Talk.
And we're back. Oh, that was wonderful, Andrea. To continue the ongoing joke that is now in its 3rd year of us pretending like we actually watched the segment before we filmed this, and it probably hasn't even been filmed yet, is my guess. I'm filming mine tomorrow, which is why you're going to see a different shirt. See, that's the secret behind the camera, people. Big secrets behind the camera. So I would say, Greg, what's your segment about? But as I'm having fun rubbing your nose in, you don't have a segment this month. So
nope, I'm just editing.
See what happens when I mute myself. So anyway, guys, here, I guess mine might be last. So what I've done is I originally created the radio communications training that I'm going to go over this month for ARES and CERT, the Amateur Radio Emergency Service and the Community Emergency Response Team, to get volunteers who aren't usually used to speaking on the radio, used to speaking on the radio. Then it transitioned into actually giving the radio communications training to first responder agencies, because come to find out, there are a lot of first responder agencies, especially in rural communities, that do not have set radio communications training. Their guys just learn to talk on the radio from listening to other people, and we know how that can go. So part of what I've done is put together an entire slideshow on things that first responders need to say, especially when we work with central dispatches in counties. And depending on how long my segment needs to be, it'll either be a 5-6 minute, I just run through it real quick and give you guys a rundown on it. Or if it's going to be longer, you're going to see so much more. I may show you the entire thing because this could be useful to first responder agencies in other counties and other states. Now, remember to check with your local central dispatch because every one of them is a little bit different. And this one is very much focused on Benton County, Missouri was where I originally made it for. I've given it in Camden County, and now I've given it in Laclede County. So it just depends on what your dispatch is looking for to let you know how you need to adjust the training. But here we go. Hi guys, KE0LMY. I'm Sam. You've probably been watching me for almost 2 years or over 2 years doing Ham Talk. This month's episode for me is on the emergency communications or radio communications training that I give to volunteer fire departments in Benton and Camden counties, well, technically Laclede County. I'm more than happy to share this information because I worked with Benton County 911 on this, and it turned out really well for informing firefighters what dispatchers need and informing dispatchers what firefighters need, not only when they come on the scene, but when they're on their way to a scene. So I'll have Greg link to the actual slideshow presentation for this comms training, probably the one specifically for Sleeper Stoutland, maybe the one for Warsaw Fire. There are small changes and differences in them. One of the most important skills and tools on a scene is communications, and it's normally the very first thing to fail in an emergency. To prevent that breakdown in communication or to manage it, the course teaches you how to use a radio, how to pass messages, and what information to include in your messages. The first slide that you really come to after that shows information on the parts of a handheld radio. Many of you, of course, are ham radio operators, so you already know that part. But again, these slides will be available linked in the information below. So one of the biggest things that I touch on with firefighters is watching out for your sibilants. And when I talk to them about sibilants, I explain to them that if they are speaking these letters directly into a microphone, especially if they're eating the mic, that it can cause the microphone to crackle. And that'll interrupt the transmission on the receiving end. They won't hear what's being said. And I cover that S, P, T, Z, F, and V are all very hard sibilants letters. There's a right way and a wrong way to actually hold a handheld radio. And of course, you all probably already know the right way is perpendicular to the ground with your body not blocking the radio waves to the nearest radio tower and speaking across the mic rather than eating it. And of course, we do also have a slide that shows the wrong way. And of course, the radio's right up here to your face. Remember, or I remind them that dispatchers, other firefighters, and other first responders can't see the scene when you're on your way there. So if you're first on, your radio transmissions are the only information they have to go on. Some of the questions dispatchers need answers to right away are, what's the level of involvement? How many occupants or victims are we dealing with? Are there cars in the driveway if there are no people visible? Is there enough equipment in district, or is mutual aid needed? In some of your more rural districts, like in Benton, Camden, and Laclede counties here in Missouri, it is extremely rural, and we have automatic mutual aid agreements. Exposure level, and color and amount of smoke. Now, here are the key components of the very first radio transmission upon arriving on scene. Your truck number is on scene. Identify yourself, ID the type of fire, whether it's structure, vehicle, or cover, level of involvement, exposures, need for assistance, how much, and is it mutual aid, and the victims, the number and severity. Of course, you know the number of victims is affected or affects the need for additional ambulances and things like that. It can take a time to roll those resources out from other locations. So before transmitting, make sure the radio is on the right channel. After passing information to central dispatch, remember to go direct, or what we call simplex in the ham radio world, on the radio when you're on scene. Then some of the information that we tell firefighters they need to immediately pass over the radio, not just for central dispatch, but for other first responders on their way to the scene, is about the location from the 360, appearance of the location. Is it a 2-story home? Is there a basement, etc.? Appearance of the location, or involvement level, passability, possible dangers and obstructions, and about potential victims. Remember, you can't transmit names, you can't transmit any identifying information, but you could identify the appearance and physical description, the state of awareness, and the injuries. We also cover the common colors and fuel in smoke. Wood and paper is gray, hydrocarbons and plastics is black, nitrogen oxides are brown or copper colored, and steam is white. So we do a couple of examples when we do this training, and we'll take pictures. You guys will see them when you look at the slideshows, where we have a firefighter come up and describe one of the pictures without showing it to the audience, and then we ask the audience which one were they describing. Now, if the firefighter did a good job, then the audience, which are other firefighters, can easily pick out which one is the scene. We ask, how did they do? Were they able to pick out the problems with the first example, which is the bad example? We tell them to give us all the things you're not going to say on the radio, versus the second example, where we ask them to do the best that they can and try and transmit as much useful information as possible. We also go over the examples of things that you're not supposed to say according to FCC regulations. And then we give the firefighters time to practice the skills that we've just taught them, which is, again, pictures that they can use to describe and see how they do on transmitting information. We have a discussion time period and then questions. Then we review everything that's been in the training. And I would again like to say the same thing that's actually on one of these slides, which is a big thank you to Ron Gentry, who was not only the retired Mid-County Fire Chief, but is also the retired Camden County Emergency Management Director. So one of my predecessors. And that is pretty much where the training ends for all of the fire departments that I provide the training to. If you guys want a more in-depth where I actually cover each slide and go into the conversations, then we can do that on a future month. But thank you so much for joining me for my segment this month, and I hope you found it useful. All right, now you guys pretend like that was the most amazing thing you've ever seen in your life.
That was really, really good. Very informative.
Very good, Sam.
I was on the edge of my seat.
Okay, Greg, I'll stop harassing you for this month because that was funny. Of course, I'm beginning to think that everybody tunes in just to see me harass you. So
You know,
that's what keeps us viewers.
It could very well be.
Hey, being the only guy and there's 3 women on here, hey, there's got to be something happening here. So let's do some final thoughts from everybody for this month. This is the beginning of the new year, so give us a little sneak preview for what you're going to try and set up. We're going to pretend like Melissa's going to get Mike's pictures. Go ahead, Melissa.
Right?
You know what you ought to do is just go find some pictures on the internet and call it in, Shack.
Oh, we could have fun with that.
All right, Miss Melissa, final thoughts?
Well, I'm hoping that people are going to see a lot less of me. So, because I plan on losing some weight. Thank you very much.
No, well, you don't need to lose any weight, please.
I'm way over my what I'm supposed to be.
And maybe we'll see Mike's pictures.
Yeah.
All right, Miss Andrea, your final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Well, you kind of tried to back us into a New Year's commitment here, and I've typically have not made New Year's resolutions because I find they're easier to meet those expectations by not setting any in the first place. So that's exactly what I did this year. So I'm set. I've met all my goals for the year. I'm going to have to find some new ones. I think one goal is to make sure I don't injure myself too much this year.
Well, what will we talk about?
I know, right? That's like half of our show. We're like, what did we get bruises from, or break on the vehicle, or fall in the bathtub?
Yeah, I know. I work and you know, it's not like I'm just clumsy like that time, you know, I was on the top of the car and the wind blew the door shut and I was relying on the door to get off the car. So now I'm stuck on top of Rover. And fortunately somebody walking up the road saw my dilemma as I'm trying to get off the car. And I'm like, can you open the door, please? Because I'm trying to take a pole that I have and stick it in the handle and open the door. So if I'm not accident prone enough, I do enough activities that like intentionally people are trying to hurt me.
Let me ask you a question. Is it possible that we hire a videographer to follow you for a week? Because I am sure that those got to have some humor in it.
There's certainly some adventures. I mean, I got clocked in the head just before the New Year's, you know, just kind of sparring, and my partner just kind of hauled back and wham, you know, it's like, whoa.
Oh my God.
You know,
and I thought I was accident.
I'm going to just say one thing on Andrea. On Facebook, I just finished reading about how she underestimated people and got her butt kicked by some people that she didn't.
No. Well, no, let's see. Yes, that was, she
well, hang on a minute. I've got a thing going here.
Okay.
And then she followed up those posts with all about getting out of DWIs. So I'm thinking the two are related.
No, that's my new, my new side hustle is to, as a personal trainer, where I'm going to train people how they can pass field sobriety tests while they're not drunk. And if they can pass that,
please delete this.
they can take the advanced class, which is passing it while drunk.
I think you should have a field sobriety test to get in the shower.
Maybe, but anyway, and you brought up the underestimate people, and yes, I did underestimate her. I did not know that she weight trained for 2 hours a day. So when she caught me like this and held me for like 5 minutes and I couldn't move, yeah, I was stuck. Now, what I did not put in there is that while I was stuck, I said to her, you know, I only have one thing I could possibly do, but it's cheating. And she said, go for it. So I tickled her and it worked.
Oh my God.
And there's today's self-defense lesson. Tickle your attacker.
Yeah, if they got a hold and just tickle them.
This is why people tune in. They have a thing to do with ham radio.
You also left out the other one where I was sparring somebody and he looked at me and he looked at this overweight, elderly, I guess I am old enough. I'm a grandmother. Anyway, woman, inexperienced, and we were sparring and he's like, he clearly didn't respect me or something. And next thing he knows, I've kicked him on one side. I flipped to my other foot, kicked him with the other side, and I have him against the ropes. And then I'm trying to decide what to do. And I just kick him one more time. And it was it.
And there you had it on Ham Talk. How to
Greg!
beat your opponent.
You are going to have so much editing to do. Oh my God. I can't even. It has gone
Well,
off the rails in
I actually
January.
kind of learned something. Stay calm, keep your cool, and
tickle.
tickle your assailant.
Apparently that works.
We'll send the mugger over to your house tonight to experiment.
So, final thoughts, Greg.
Well, Ruth's got a emergency drill with the state down in Corpus Christi this coming, I think, first or second week of February. So we're going to be bringing the hamster trailer in, which is basically Rover, but for a 3-man operation. It's a full trailer, com trailer we built back in 2013. And I think it's got about 8,000 miles on it since 2013. So it's there. But I next month, I want to do a segment with Ruth on, it's time for my net. I want to do a segment on the trailer and stuff next month. So that's kind of what we're going to gear for and do some video and stuff of it, because it's pretty elaborate system. And that's it.
I just want to clarify that that's a Rover. It isn't Rover.
Rover, right? All right, guys, I'm on 20%.
No, it's actually
battery.
the
Let's wrap this up. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, the Hamsters Week Signal Group. We appreciate it. Next month, I guess I didn't do my final thoughts. Well, you know what? You can have my final thoughts next month. So we appreciate everybody that joins us. We do exactly that. We try and bring a little bit of humor, a little bit more lightheartedness, because I've seen some of the drier ham radio discussions and they put me to sleep. So we like to have fun. We like to lighten it up a little bit. We give you the technical stuff that, that's Greg and Andrea. Melissa and I, we just kind of have a little fun with everything and occasionally bring something useful to the table. So if you're enjoying this and you want to kick off the rest of 2023 with us, then join us next month. We're going to have some great stuff and, of course, hang out. We want any of your comments and questions down below. And if Greg forgets to put the links and everything else, we'll yell at him for you. But please do leave some information for us. Send any of pictures of your ham shack in so that Melissa can have that segment up and running again. I know that she misses that. She really enjoys doing it. And we will see you next month. 73, everybody.
73.
73.